On the surface, state media insists that life is normal, that prosperity continues. But when you step into the streets and listen to the voices of ordinary citizens, a very different story emerges, one of struggle, despair, and lives pushed to the brink. For millions of families, putting food on the table has become nearly impossible. Working people speak bluntly. For those at the very bottom, the chance to survive feels crushed to almost nothing. By the time evening falls, around 6:30, the day's opportunities vanish. People who wait for day labor must accept that if they are not hired by then, they must trudge home empty-handed, with no money earned. Each morning, they gather again, hoping for work. If none comes, they return home in silence. Across the country, countless scenes highlight this exhaustion. One delivery worker was filmed handing a milk tea order to a customer. Strapped to his back was a small child. When asked why he was delivering food while carrying his child, he replied, without hesitation, "I have no choice. Perhaps in the next life things will be easier. This one is simply too hard." His words reflect the exhaustion of an entire class of people caught between survival and hopelessness. Many admit they can no longer endure. More and more citizens pass time in public parks, not for leisure, but because they cannot afford to do anything else. At home, their children go without proper meals. "There is nothing filling left," one parent confessed, "just scraps of food to hold the hunger down." Another sighed, "Life in this society is unbearable. We ordinary people suffer too much. Something as simple as a drink has become unaffordable. For many, even a bowl of rice must suffice for the day." At 3 o'clock in the morning in Shanghai, the hidden reality comes into focus. Under one overpass, a man counted no fewer than a dozen delivery drivers lying directly on the ground, without tents, sleeping rough after long shifts. Their exhaustion is matched only by their invisibility. These men, who keep the gig economy running, cannot afford beds of their own. In Guangdong province, young graduates pour into factories hoping for jobs, but just across the region, in Dongguan, factories are closing one after another. Thousands of young men and women wander the streets, unemployed, sleeping in train stations or drainage pipes because they cannot afford rooms. For China's so-called future generation, adulthood begins not with opportunity, but with abandonment. The elderly reveal another contrast. In cities, retired men dance in public squares to keep themselves active. In rural areas, elderly farmers collect bottles from trash heaps to sell for pennies. When asked how they will cope with sickness in old age, one elderly farmer answered with brutal honesty, "I will drink pesticide." These words, simple but cutting, reflect the absence of a safety net. After working their entire lives, many face their last years with nothing but despair. Personal tragedies are everywhere. One man, only 40 years old, is already facing kidney failure. He has chosen not to seek treatment, not because he is lazy or unwilling, but because he cannot afford it. Bus fare to the hospital is beyond his means, let alone medical tests. He has worked hard his entire life, yet all he has is pain and hopelessness. A friend who wanted to help admitted, "Even if I help once, what about next time? I can't carry him forever." These private sorrows accumulate silently, invisible to the world. Meanwhile, the economy continues to deteriorate. The property market has collapsed, companies fold daily, and foreign investment drains away. Layoffs are widespread. Millions remain unemployed. As people sleep beneath bridges, the Chinese Communist Party spends staggering sums on vanity projects, parades, festivals, and foreign aid packages. One military parade was estimated to cost 36 billion yuan. In the same breath, Beijing pledged billions in foreign aid to other countries. At home, hunger spreads. Abroad, money is given away to purchase prestige. The contrast has only fueled bitterness among the people. Age discrimination deepens despair. Employers increasingly refuse to hire anyone over 35. A man in his late 40s, laid off after decades at the same firm, found himself unemployable overnight. Penniless and starving, he wandered the streets until a sandwich shop owner took pity on him, handing him a meal for free. Such small acts of kindness keep some alive, but they do not change the larger truth. For millions, survival is uncertain. As for the Long-Harrimans, survival is uncertain. Across Shanghai and other cities, the festive atmosphere that once defined the end of each year has vanished. Restaurants, supermarkets, and small shops are closing in waves. Everything now is fake prosperity, many workers say. Behind the facade, there is only collapse. Hunger is perhaps the clearest sign. On the streets, beggars plead not for luxuries, but for a simple meal. "Can someone spare 30 yuan so I can eat?" one man begged. "I haven't eaten all day." When elderly people are asked how often they eat meat, their answers are devastating. "Only once during the new year," one replied. Another admitted, "Maybe once every 2 or 3 months, just enough to taste it." In a country once proud of its rising living standards, ordinary citizens cannot afford basic protein. At job markets in Chengdu, thousands gather daily, looking not for careers but simply for a day's work to survive. Most are middle-aged, poorly educated, and physically exhausted. They earn 150 yuan, maybe 160 at best, for an entire day's hard labor. By dawn, they crowd under overpasses, wearing worn helmets and carrying heavy bags, waiting to be chosen. By 6 in the morning, some are picked up by recruiters, but many are left behind. For every 5 workers chosen, dozens more are rejected. Those left stand silently, defeated, muttering to themselves, "Life is too hard. In the next life, I won't be human. I'd rather be a bird or even a stone." Heat and cold compound the misery. In ramshackle dorms without air conditioning, workers toss and turn through unbearable nights before rising to work again. Exhaustion becomes their only constant. At the same time, Beijing continues to spend lavishly abroad. In 2021, Xi Jinping promised 360 billion yuan in aid to Africa over 3 years. Such pledges follow decades of spending in Africa, where projects often fail or are abandoned. Critics argue this is nothing more than an attempt to buy prestige from corrupt foreign governments, while citizens at home are told to tighten their belts. A former Beijing lawyer summarized it bluntly: "Ordinary people suffer, yet the regime gives money away. It is not for generosity, but for face." In reality, the suffering of the poor has never disappeared. Beggars line the streets of every city. Some are disabled, some deformed, many suspiciously organized in ways suggesting trafficking. Even begging has been modernized. One beggar carried no arms, only a container with a QR code taped to it inviting digital donations. The line between desperation and exploitation has blurred. The elderly suffer the most. Men, nearly 80, confess they cannot stop working because otherwise they cannot eat. Yet their bodies collapse under the strain. They wander with no ID, no family support, no hope. Once factory workers, they are cast aside when demand slows, left penniless. Many spend their last coins searching for work, then collapse when nothing comes. Occasionally, small kindnesses appear. A street food vendor, moved by pity, hands a meal to a man with nothing left. "We are all the same," he said softly. "Sit down, eat, you are one of us." Yet these gestures cannot solve the overwhelming tide of suffering. Recruitment spots capture the raw desperation. When a van arrives, workers surge forward, pleading for a spot. Foremen take a few, leaving the rest behind. A man who missed his chance stood frozen in despair, whispering that he hoped never to be born human again. These moments, multiplied across thousands of streets, form the true picture of China today. Meanwhile, the government pours billions into military parades, international summits, and grand displays. Last September's African aid pledge was just the latest in a 6-decade pattern. To ordinary citizens, it feels like betrayal. "We are starving, and they give away money abroad," one commentator wrote online. All so they can look strong. Unemployment has become a wildfire spreading through China's largest cities. Young graduates cannot find work even after years of study. Factories collapse in waves. Small businesses vanish. Bankruptcy has become routine. Homelessness, once rare, now defines urban landscapes. In Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangdong, entire districts lie quiet. Shops shuttered, streets filled with jobless men sleeping under bridges. Families break under the pressure of debt, layoffs, and rising costs. For many, the so-called Chinese dream is dead. What remains is silent despair, endured by millions each day. The scenes of hunger, homelessness, and despair described here are not isolated tragedies, but part of a broader pattern that runs through China's social fabric. Just as the epidemic of missing persons and human trafficking reveals a system that fails to protect its most vulnerable, the economic collapse and mass unemployment show how deeply ordinary lives are devalued under the same structure of governance. Whether it is women chained in rural villages, children stolen from their parents, or workers sleeping beneath bridges, the common thread is the same: a state more invested in maintaining control and projecting power than in safeguarding its people. In this way, the story of vanishing citizens and the story of economic despair are 2 chapters of the same book, an ongoing narrative of survival against abandonment in modern China. In one corner of a Chinese city, a surveillance camera recorded a chilling scene. A man can be seen carrying a young girl dressed in red along a street, while another man pulls up in a van to assist him. The video ends abruptly, leaving unanswered questions. Will this girl ever be rescued, or will she become another statistic in China's long list of the disappeared? Ironically, this happened in a nation that boasts the highest number of surveillance cameras on the planet. Some media outlets have estimated that there are more than 200 million cameras installed across China, making it one of the most heavily monitored countries in the world. A British research platform once calculated that on average, there is one camera for every 2 people in China. If these devices were used effectively by law enforcement, finding missing people should not be difficult. Yet in practice, despite the omnipresent eyes of the state, those who vanish often remain lost forever. The paradox lies in the system itself, an authoritarian framework where surveillance is more focused on political control than on protecting vulnerable citizens. In February 2021, China's Ministry of Civil Affairs, together with the Institute of Social Assistance, released a report titled The White Paper on China's Missing Population 2020. The document presented statistics meant to highlight progress. In 2020, approximately 2,739 people were reported missing every day, which translates to roughly 1 million missing persons in that year alone. Put differently, 2 people disappeared every minute across the country. Shockingly, the white paper framed this as an improvement compared to previous years, noting that 3.94 million people were reported missing in 2016 and 2.6 million in 2017. Even with this so-called decline, the numbers remain staggering, representing countless families broken apart. Experts have long pointed out that women and children make up the majority of the victims, and most cases are linked to abduction, entrapment, or trafficking. The U.S. State Department's 2019 Trafficking in Persons report ranked China among the world's worst performers in fighting human trafficking, placing it only slightly above Libya, Somalia, and Yemen, countries torn apart by conflict where trafficking is rampant. That placement alone shows how severe and systemic the problem has become in China. One story that shocked the Chinese public came in early 2022 when a video surfaced of a woman, later known as the chained mother, who had given birth to 8 children while living in captivity in a rural village. Footage showed her confined with heavy chains, revealing years of abuse and forced reproduction. Investigations later indicated she had been trafficked at the age of 12, her life reduced to that of a tool for bearing children. The case provoked outrage across the nation, but it was only the tip of an iceberg that has been growing for decades. Shortly after, another incident in the same region was caught on video. During a fire drill, a young girl rushed toward firefighters and clung to them desperately, as though seeking refuge from something too terrifying to explain. Such glimpses, though rare, expose the human toll behind the statistics. Official data from the Ministry of Public Security has been used by state media to demonstrate success in combating trafficking. In February 2015, the state-run Legal Daily reported that in the previous year, more than 30,000 women had been rescued from traffickers. Yet these figures, intended as propaganda, inadvertently highlight the magnitude of the issue. If tens of thousands can be rescued in a single year, how many more remain unaccounted for? Hidden behind the numbers are the countless women still trapped, sold, or silenced. Footage circulating online shows suspected victims under the control of traffickers, women being coerced, ordered to remain quiet, told what to say and what not to say. Some victims recount being lured by false job advertisements before being transported to remote areas where escape is nearly impossible. Many of the abducted women are sold into impoverished rural communities. China's severe gender imbalance, a consequence of the one-child policy and deep-rooted preference for sons, created a shortage of women, particularly in the countryside. In these areas, poverty combines with desperation. Men unable to secure marriages through conventional means sometimes resort to purchasing wives, fueling demand for trafficked women. The country's rigid household registration system, or hukou, has further entrenched inequality. Rural residents have historically been denied access to the social benefits available in cities, leaving them at the bottom of the economic ladder. In the marriage market, these disadvantaged men often cannot compete financially, and traffickers exploit the gap. The result is a supply chain of misery. Countless girls and women abducted, sold, and forced into lives from which escape is nearly impossible. Families left behind endure years, sometimes decades, of agony. A father recounted how his 14-year-old daughter disappeared on her way to school in Beijing's Daxing district in April 2008. All that was found was one of her shoes by the roadside. He has spent more than 13 years searching, a relentless pursuit with no end in sight. Another mother spoke of her daughter, born in 1997, who vanished in 2007 while walking to her elementary school in Anhui province. The girl bore a faint scar beneath her left eye, a small detail her mother still clings to while calling out, "Where are you? Are you safe?" For nearly 15 years, she has searched tirelessly, describing her quest as looking for a needle in a haystack. The desperation in such voices is palpable, and they echo across thousands of families who share the same fate. What makes the tragedy more complex is that in rural regions, the practice of buying women has, in some twisted way, contributed to what authorities describe as social stability. A large population of unmarried men unable to find wives is seen by the government as a potential source of unrest. Instead of addressing the underlying causes, the authorities have often looked the other way, tacitly tolerating the illegal trade. Villages become complicit in keeping abducted women captive, with entire communities acting as enforcers. Women who attempt escape face dire consequences. Many are chained, deprived of basic dignity, and over time they may suffer irreversible psychological and physical harm, reduced to shadows of their former selves, unable to speak, walk, or even function after years of abuse. A disturbing revelation emerged from an official document titled Notice of Several Opinions on the Work of Rescuing Trafficked Women and Children. It astonishingly suggested that trafficked girls who had grown into adulthood and who wished to remain with their buyers could formalize the arrangement by registering the marriage legally and transferring their household registration. Such policy not only legitimized the crime but also reinforced a system where victims are permanently trapped. In December 2021, one father was filmed weeping uncontrollably as he embraced his daughter, whom he had not seen in 20 years after she was abducted as a child. His tears captured the rare moment when a family's nightmare finally ended. But for every such reunion, countless others never occur. Even Chinese academics have pointed out the absurdity of the legal framework. A lecture by a law professor from the China University of Political Science and Law circulated online in 2020, highlighting the disparity in sentencing. The professor explained that illegally purchasing a parrot in China could result in a maximum of 5 years in prison, whereas buying one or even several women typically carried a maximum sentence of only 3 years. Shockingly, he equated the punishment to that of illegally buying 20 bald toads. His conclusion was damning. In legal terms, the value of a Chinese woman was considered less than that of a parrot, a reflection of the systemic failure to deter traffickers or buyers. The stories of mothers searching for their children further illuminate the depth of this crisis. One mother from Hubei province recounted how her daughter was abducted in 2013 from just outside their home. For more than 9 years, she has continued her search, appealing to strangers, spreading pleas online, and calling her daughter's name into a void. "I've been looking for you everywhere," she said, "and I will not stop." These personal narratives, heartbreaking as they are, reveal the resilience of parents who refuse to give up hope despite overwhelming odds. International organizations have also studied the problem. UNESCO's Institute Against Human Trafficking analyzed 800 cases from 2006 to 2007, finding that nearly 1/5 of trafficked women were forced into prostitution, while more than 40% vanished without any record of their fate. Importantly, such crimes are not confined to remote villages. Organized groups operate in major cities, exploiting vulnerable women and children under the noses of authorities. Boys are not spared either. In one case, an elderly woman turned around in a market to find her 6-year-old grandson had disappeared. Chinese media have reported that as many as 200,000 children go missing in the country each year, which averages to about 550 children every day. An estimated 80% of these children are abducted and sold, while the chance of recovery is as low as 1%. Traffickers often target very young children who cannot yet form lasting memories of their families, making them easier to sell to unsuspecting buyers. Desperate parents frustrated by official inaction have formed grassroots organizations like Child Finders. With around 700 members, many of them low-income migrant workers, these groups try to pool resources and share information to locate their children. Some Beijing-based NGOs estimate that trafficked children face grim outcomes, depending on their age. Those under 5 are often adopted by families seeking sons, while those between 5 and 8 are forced into labor, prostitution, or reproductive exploitation. Some gangs deliberately mutilate children to turn them into beggars on city streets. Older children face even darker fates, including forced criminal work or organ trafficking. For parents, the fear is overwhelming. Not only have they lost their children, but they know the lives awaiting them may be worse than death. The trafficking crisis in China is further entangled with reports of organ harvesting. In November 2013, Phoenix Weekly, a Hong Kong-based magazine with ties to the mainland, published a lengthy exposé on China's underground organ trade. The article acknowledged that transplant tourism had flourished, with wealthy patients, both domestic and foreign, able to obtain organs in record time. International experts concluded that such efficiency would be impossible without a massive hidden organ bank, possibly including live harvesting. Reports suggested that vulnerable groups such as prisoners, Falun Gong practitioners, the poor, and trafficked women and children might all be targeted as unwilling sources. Activists have held protests accusing hospitals of stealing organs, but the risks of speaking out are immense. Families who attempt to expose wrongdoing face harassment, intimidation, and arrest. Underlying many of these problems are structural policies dating back decades. The one-child policy, implemented for more than 30 years, distorted family planning and fueled demand for boys. The household registration system, designed in the 1950s, rigidly tied individuals to their birthplace, restricting access to education, healthcare, and housing. Although reforms in 2014 abolished some rural-urban distinctions, they excluded major metropolitan areas like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangdong. Migrant families remain trapped in a cycle of inequality, their children often left unattended and vulnerable to traffickers. Stories abound of children abducted from construction sites or markets, where parents worked long hours only to vanish without a trace. Even when trafficked individuals grow up, they sometimes try to piece together fragments of memory to find their origins. Online forums feature posts by adults who suspect they were abducted as children, describing hazy recollections of parents' names, hometown landscapes, or family routines. Their pleas to be recognized show the lasting scars of a stolen childhood. Despite the advanced surveillance state, including mandatory SIM card registration, facial recognition systems, and compulsory photo IDs, the Chinese authorities consistently fail when it comes to resolving human trafficking. The contrast is striking. While the same tools are used relentlessly to silence dissent or track political activists, they are curiously ineffective in rescuing missing citizens. In March 2022, after mounting public outrage over high-profile cases, the Chinese government issued a statement declaring that protecting the rights and interests of women and children was the government's responsibility, and promising to crack down severely on traffickers. Yet the reality has been different. In February 2022, a retired law professor submitted a proposal calling for 2022 to be designated as the Year of Anti-Trafficking, urging the authorities to prioritize action. His letter warned that if the buying and selling of women and children were not stamped out, more lives would be destroyed. The proposal was deleted from Weibo within 20 minutes, and the professor himself was summoned by police. Similarly, citizens who shared posts about the chained mother case faced intimidation. On March 8, one man was detained simply for reposting commentary. A mural created by a student at the Tianjin Academy of Fine Arts featuring the words of "The Chained Woman, the world doesn't want me anymore," was quickly censored. The mural was covered in black paint, and the students behind it were reportedly detained. Once again, the instinct of the authorities was not to address the underlying crimes, but to silence discussion. This is the tragedy of human trafficking in China, an immense human crisis hidden in plain sight, overshadowed by censorship and political calculation. The government's vast surveillance apparatus, which should be a powerful tool for protecting citizens, has been weaponized instead to maintain political control. Victims are silenced, families are left to search alone, and the cycle of exploitation continues. Behind every statistic is a shattered family, a lost child, a woman stripped of her freedom, and a society that looks the other way.